Well, it gives me great pleasure to be able to introduce our two daughters of artists here. We have here Lisa Jahn-Clough, it's very difficult, and Lina Burley. Linda is the daughter of Lina Burley, whose work you see here, and Lisa is the daughter of Elena Jahn, whose work is over here. Now, we're using the theme of sort of Mother's Day and influence on people to bring these two daughters of artists who were very important in the early days of the gallery to talk about their mothers and what it was like growing up as daughters of these wonderful artists. So she grew up on Long Island, majored in economics at Middlebury College. It's very interesting how different these two are. You'll notice that as I discuss their backgrounds. She spent 10 years working in the technology transfer department of MIT. And there, through that job, she met a Dutchman who became her husband, and she lived and worked in the Netherlands for 12 years, primarily in publishing. After that marriage was over, she returned to the US in 1994. And eventually worked in Boston at Cambridge Associates, which is a global institutional investment advisory firm. And she headed the legal department there for 17 years. She moved to her parents' house in Booth Bay in 2008. Her mother had died in 2005, I think. And she was working long distance, commuting to Boston also. And finally, she retired in 2012. She represents the third generation of her family to retire to the same location in East Booth Bay on Lincoln Bay. And she's a very active member of the community there and has served on several boards in the area. And I can attest that she's a great appreciator of the arts and has a very sharp eye for quality in art, because I've wandered around shows with her and discussed art. She's very supportive of artists. Now, Lisa Jahn-Clough has quite a different background. She was raised by a very eccentric mother and had I gather, somewhat unpredictable childhood. But she grew up basically the first 10 years on a farm in Rhode Island and summered in Maine. And after those first 10 years, her family moved to Maine full time. She earned her BA at Hampshire College in Massachusetts and MFA from Emerson College in Boston. And she has been writing, teaching, and publishing ever since. She's a children's book author, illustrator, and professor of creative writing. She has taught at Emerson and Maine College of Art, Vermont College of Fine Arts, and Hamline University in Minnesota. She's now a tenured professor at Rowan, is that how you pronounce it?
Rowan.
University.
I like unpronounceable things.
Our challenge. In New Jersey, and what part of her job is speaking to hundreds of elementary, middle, and high school students and teachers as a visiting author. She has published over a dozen picture books, 3 young adult novels, and her work has won many awards in the children's book field. Right now, she's working on a text for a series of early reader graphic comic books. She lives in Portland, Maine with her husband and dogs in the summer and lives in southern New Jersey in the winter. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce our two speakers here. Now, I think we should just sort of start a discussion about, well, I don't know which direction to go first. Maybe how you felt your growing up period was influenced by your mother's being an artist.
Well, definitely everything about who I am now has to do with who my mother was, and my father too. I feel like my mother has always gotten a lot of attention. My father died when I was 19, so that was a long time ago, but he was also very interesting. He studied lemmings. We went to Norway. He figured out like why lemmings jump over cliffs, which they don't do intentionally. So, this is why we lived on a little farm. So, you know, my father also gets a lot of credit in who I am, but they were also very different. Their marriage didn't last more than like 10 or 12 years. So I don't know. It's also very interesting because I have always been somewhat a shadow of my mother. She's very eccentric, was very eccentric, loved to dance, loved to make music, loved to sing, loved to cook. People still contact me who knew my mother and didn't know me or knew me when I was young, and they tell me how much my mother influenced them and how much they loved her, and they've learned how to garden from her. And so, you know, I always felt like I was the shy, quiet one who was, you know, never the life of the party, and my mother was always in the living room, discoing to the Bee Gees. I was hiding upstairs in my room, doing my homework. So it is.
I'm sure.
I was definitely a role reversal of mother-daughter, but it is so funny to me that I am still like a shadow of my mother to some degree. Like, here I am, my mother the artist. But I have to say,
you can't say my mother the car.
yeah. But it's interesting, though, 10 years since she's been gone, I mean, I always loved my mother. We used to share, I used to tell her everything up until I was a teenager, and then I told her nothing. But we were always very close, regardless of that, and I loved her incredibly much. I miss her terribly still sometimes, and I'm now, like, in charge of her work. I used to go to our family house on Monhegan now every summer, where she had a studio, and I've gotten to know her work in a much more intimate way. Like, I see work that I remember her painting. I see work that was around that she had done when I was little, and then I found work that I never knew she did, like way before I was born, and it's just like living with her in a whole different way.
Yeah.
And I think I was telling you, like, I could never have done this talk when she was alive. Like, she would have been, you know, doing it herself.
Yeah. Maybe we better find out from.
Yes.
I mean, you're a very different trajectory from your mother.
Yes, but the feelings I think that you're expressing, I share as well. Well, I will start out. First of all, I'm the only child, not just the daughter. And my first experience of art, I vividly remember, is mother took me to the Museum of Modern Art, and I was 7 years old. And she took me to a room, and she said, now, look at everything in the room and tell me what's your favorite. And it was a collage by Kurt Schwitters. Now, at that time, of course, my reading was very unadvanced, so I couldn't cheat and read the labels. And she said, well, now look around and see if you can pick out another painting by that artist. And that was so much fun. And although I never pursued art myself, she gave me this huge appreciation for art. It's not intimidating, it's just exhilarating. And we went to museums and galleries together until the last year of her life, and I miss that terribly. When I was 10, my mother came to me and said, I want to go study at the Art Students League. We're back in the early 50s. The men had come back from war, the women who had jobs were displaced, and people were frantically trying to create families, to have homes and structure. And mother was dying. I didn't realize it until I was much older, but it took, I can't imagine now the courage it took her to tell a 10-year-old, if I need to go to New York and study art, and if I'm not home when you get home from school, will you be all right with that? And I remember I remember the conversation, and I remember saying, as long as I don't need to go in the cellar. And so she did. She studied at the Art Students League from, well, I have it written down. I wrote it down. By the way, for those of you who don't know her, I did bring a photo. It was
Nice.
there we go. And so I swear, well, I did write it down, but I've forgotten now. But anyway, it was almost 10 years.